Hello! We are doing something a bit different today. This is the Castrol EDGE Titanium Trials series, and no, this video is not sponsored by Castrol EDGE. However, since I've got you all for about 9 minutes, I'd like to take a bit of time to talk about the whole sponsors in video games thing. If you're not normally into racing, racing as a sport has always been sponsor-driven. It's why professional courses are littered with sponsors, and why cars will have sponsor decals plastered all over them. So when it comes to games about racing, even games about illegal street racing, sponsors are still going to play a major part. You do not see this as much in other genres. In fact, when I did videos on Journey to the Savage Planet, my final episode of that series was all about the in-game commercials, which were all parodies of real commercials. And again, the game was very much a take-that approach to capitalism, and also to a broader degree the exploitation of the environment, just on other planets because space. So when this does happen in other genres, fans of those genres tend to get rather irritated. There was a social media fiasco late last year where I guess Adidas slipped in a tracksuit design into the newest PS5 Spider-Man game, and everyone was all silence brand. But again, if you are a racing fan, you wouldn't even bat an eyelash. And in the case of Need for Speed, it has gone even further since the release of this game. Heat and Unbound place special attention on driver customization now, so in those games you can deck out your character in actual brand-based apparel, and people liked that apparently. Do I like it? No, not really. You've probably noticed I never deck out my cars in sponsorships of any kind if I can help it. All of my cars are painted solid colors and may occasionally have a decal or two. I do not like having sponsors on my cars at all, and I don't care for games where sponsors are plastered everywhere, such as sanctioned racing games like Grid, or the motorsport side of the Forza brand. So the whole thing with Castrol EDGE is, well, jarring to me. You may have already noticed sponsored billboards are not only on things like delivery trucks, they're in actual cutscenes also. You cannot get away from them in this game. There are other sponsors here and there as well. I've seen a few Samsung billboards, for instance, but they were not nearly as prevalent as this one company across literally the entire game. As you will recall, in a prior episode, I made a reference to Castrol Oil because one of the minor characters is named Jimmy, and there used to be a Castrol commercial where the tagline was, "Think with your dipstick, Jimmy." So while this may be tinfoil hatting, I do believe the name choice was intended. And no, this is not even the first time where a Need for Speed game has subjected the player to sponsorship hell. Back in the days of Underground and Underground 2, when you applied aftermarket parts to your cars, the game required you to select a brand of your choice. And going further, some included sponsors had nothing to do with racing at all. For instance, Underground had McDonald's as a sponsor, Underground 2 had Burger King. Underground 2 also had a cell phone function in the game, and that of course was sponsored by Cingular Wireless. Now the funniest thing about that sponsorship is Cingular acquired AT&T in October 2004, literally a month before Underground 2 came out, but then literally a year later, there was a merger with another telecom company, and all of that was rebranded AT&T, which we now all know today. So I can't say whether that sponsorship was a win, a fail, or both. Anyway, we're near the end of the race, so let's move on to something else in a moment. Rather surprising reaction from the normally stoic Jess there. Now, we're on to Mac in 2 events. The first is a short sprint through the desert, while the second will be a much longer romp along mountain trails. This all gives you a chance to get a glimpse of the geographic diversity in a game like this, something I kind of gloss over during the main series of episodes. Now, one of the main draws of Need for Speed for someone like me is that the open worlds tend to be beautifully done. They take inspiration from real-world locations. For example, Payback is very obviously based on Clark County, Nevada, which is home to Las Vegas. But they didn't just give you the city, they gave you everything in the outlying land surrounding it. So there are several fictional analogs to the actual real-world places, like Red Rock Canyon, the Mount Potosi Observatory, the solar fields out of Boulder City, and of course Hoover Dam at Lake Mead. Part of the appeal of driving games, in my opinion, is being transported to places you might never get to see IRL. Granted, I finally got to visit Vegas for myself in 2022, but in the week I was there, I only ever saw a fraction of everything that area has to offer. Like, I saw Hoover Dam and the solar fields, but I never saw Red Rock Canyon or the nearby observatory because I just didn't have time to. And all NFS games have been rather good at these kinds of conveyances, though some locations do seem to be used multiple times. For instance, both Palm City in NFS Heat and Tri-City Bay in NFS Undercover borrow heavily from Miami, Florida. And even Palmont City from NFS Carbon borrows heavily from Las Vegas and the Clark County area in many of the ways that Payback does. One thing I do wish is that EA were to develop a full open-world cross-country game, not unlike The Crew, but I think after experimenting with the run, they must not see a way to pull it off with the level of aesthetic detail we've grown used to from NFS, so oh well. Anyway, this race is almost done, and we'll be on to one more.
World's greatest right here.
Alright, we are now on a much more perilous off-road section, and you're gonna notice me messing up a lot in this one. So, when I edited the main series, since it's actually already done long before the time of this side episode even coming out, I tried very hard to both leave in my mistakes, but also to not make them so jarring that they distract from the overall themes of the episodes. And throughout the history of my channel, I've tried to make it a bit of a running gag that I quote-unquote suck at racing games, even though to be completely honest, I'm about average with them. If I actually sit down and do a race multiple times, actually learn the layout and how my car is going to respond, then I have in the past had some rather impressive times, scores, what have you, on various tracks in various games. But at the same time, I am just not a very competitive person. I've never believed that you have to be number one in any event, no matter what it is. I like racing games where you can make the top 3 and still advance. I feel like in the real world, if you place or get on the podium repeatedly, even if you aren't the best of the best, others are going to take notice of your skills, and you'll be rewarded handsomely for that. Because at the end of the day, you aren't just competing with a handful of other drivers, you're also putting on a show for a much larger audience. And the outcome of that performance is going to be directly proportional to the kind of racer lifestyle that you want. This is very much a pragmatist point of view, and it's something that I'll probably cover more in episodes of the Crew Motorfest, but with Payback in particular, I wasn't really too focused on overall performance, and it kind of shows. My focus was instead on capturing the story of the game and bringing that to a YouTube audience, so most of these events were one and done, no prep, no practice, just go in and knock it out. I'm still somewhat happy with how I did, don't get me wrong. And more than that, I do hope you are all enjoying the main series and that you will enjoy the side story episodes that are also in the works. I think I've said enough, so we'll see how this turns out.
Spectacular!
Alright, that's all for this episode. I will see you in the next one.